People of the internet, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining in. Now I know that almost all of you joined the channel a few days ago where I made a video about some very unfortunate incidents that happened to the Hindu minority in my country, and I would love to give you guys more developments to that story, but as of right now that story had no pleasant developments, and it's just really depressing. So as soon as new information comes out about that story, I'll let you guys know. But today let's talk about something that's a little less depressing so that we can be a little lighthearted. Okay, today I wanted to talk to you guys about the American fetish with socialism. I've recently read an article in the Huffington Post which said 47% of Americans would support socialism. If you look at Americans within the age group 18 to 29, that number goes up to roughly 70%. Now, let me be the first to say that I do not necessarily consider Huffington Post to be a trustworthy source, so do take those numbers with a grain of salt. And maybe in this case they are accurate, I'm not entirely sure. So let's talk a little bit about socialism. Before we get into socialism, let me talk about my exposure to socialism. My country was born in 1971, and we started out as a socialist country. During the inception of my country and many years afterwards, we heavily depended on foreign aid for almost everything. In the foreign media, my country became known as the bottomless basket, because no matter how much foreign aid was being poured into my nation, there was no productive use for it, or at least it was not being used productively. In 1974, we suffered one of the worst famines in the history of our entire region, not just our country. The causes for that famine? A flood had something to do with it, but the biggest cause, according to historians, is government mismanagement of funds. We continued to depend on foreign aid for many years after. In 1988, we started revising our socialist policies in terms of as far as the agriculture was concerned. In less than a decade, I guess in half of a decade later, we attained food grain self-sufficiency. Our country started opening up the free market in the late 80s and the early 90s. And before long, every single sector started getting a massive boost from the private sector. Our private banks started outperforming the government banks. Private education started outperforming government education in terms of reaching more people. Today, according to a Forbes article, 80% of the people in my country support the free market. So why such a massive shift from socialism to a cap open market economy, or a free market economy, my bad. I would like to believe that the reason why this massive cultural shift took place is because people in my country saw firsthand the differences between socialism and a more capitalist economy. Let's talk about socialism. Socialism is defined as a state where the government or the community takes control over the production and distribution of resources. A problem with that, at least in my opinion, it is based on the assumption that the state or the government or the people in community who are responsible for this production and distribution decisions know what is best for the country and will act in the best interest of the country. That to me seems to be too strict of an assumption, because historically that hasn't proven to be true. Governments historically in almost all countries have proven to be corrupt, short-sighted, myopic, and don't necessarily work in the best interest of the people. Now, socialism, I believe, came from a very good place. It came from the general idea of equality, which sounds good on paper, but whenever certain groups in society are given the power to ensure that equality, I would believe historically it has not worked out well. Now, in the recent years, socialism has become a bit of a hot issue, particularly in the United States. And I would believe that one of the reasons for that being the recent elections. Now, whether you're in the United States or whether you're outside, you've probably all heard of Bernie Sanders. He was very close to becoming the Democratic nominee. Not really, but we won't get into that here. And his message was about socialism. He wanted to give people free healthcare, free education, and he really brought socialism back to political discourse, and he really won a lot of young people over. Let's revise his message once again. Socialism is the state where the government takes control of production and distribution in the economy. When Bernie Sanders was talking about socialism, his examples of socialist victories in the world consisted of countries like Denmark. There's a problem with that. One of the more basic problems is that the Prime Minister of Denmark openly said, "Hey, I'm really glad we like our country and all, but quit calling us socialists. We are an open market-based economy." My bad. We are a free market-based economy. I don't know why I keep messing that up. This brings us to another important problem. Socialists, at least in the United States, have moved the goalposts so far that the very definition of socialism has come into question. Socialists, at least within the United States, think that a country that gives its citizens free healthcare, free education, is automatically socialist. That's not true. A capitalist country that has enough tax revenues can choose to spend that tax revenue in any way that country chooses. And certain countries like Denmark do choose to spend their tax revenues on giving people education and healthcare. Denmark is a very open market, free market. I don't know why I keep messing that up. Is a free market-based economy. And the evidence of that is Denmark's business-friendly policies. They have lower corporate tax rates and have more freedoms for small businesses. This allows for more small businesses and this generates a lot of revenue for the country. The country then chooses to spend this revenue to give people services like education and healthcare. That does not mean that this country is a socialist country. That means that the country has policies which is business friendly and they can generate a lot of revenues. And this is what's worrying. People in the United States have started to look at certain examples, and these examples don't focus on the definition of socialism, but rather they focus on the ideal outcomes that would have resulted from a utopian socialist state, and therefore conclude that socialism is best. Not to say that capitalism is without its flaws. Capitalism definitely isn't. But if we compare the two philosophies, capitalism and socialism, side by side, and let the performance of each of these systems speak for itself, then capitalism has fully outperformed socialism. And it's not hard to see. However, people that have spent an entire lifetime indulging in the benefits and material benefits of capitalist societies seem to often forget the core principles of capitalism which led to its abundance of wealth. Now, that being said, capitalism is a system that is not perfect. It can be improved upon. And that is not to say that all of socialism is garbage and should be discarded completely. But when an ideology starts misrepresenting its very own definitions to try to make it look successful, that is generally not a good sign. Well guys, that's my thought on socialism in America. Tell me if I'm right, tell me if you agree with me or if I've missed the mark completely. Let me know in your comments down below and I'll see you guys next time.